hey, you just want to be rich, right? Just want to own a lot of property. We live in Springfield, Missouri. 4 kids, 8 grandkids. By the way, I'm in kind of a different kind of mood today. So, and those of you watching at home, hang in there. But since I was here last time, I had a birthday. I turned 60 years old. I know some of you are looking at me like, no, you look way too young to be 60. No? Okay, so some of you started laughing. No, you're pretty old, dude. Anyway, but yeah, I was like, I'm in the 60s now. Yeah. So, but yeah, like whoever said that, I don't know, maybe one other people are in the 60s. The rest of you are all young. Anyway, but it's just great to be here. And we're going to continue in this series that you guys have been on winning at home. Yeah? Okay, because here's the deal. Honestly, what I've learned as both a parent and I've been in youth ministry for like 40 years. I've been doing this thing. And so I've talked with teenagers all those times. What I've learned is if you can win at home, you can win just about anywhere in life. Because the battles seem to really be in the home a lot of times. And they affect everything that we do. I mean, if things aren't going at home really well, then what happens is that our workplace, our school, our attitudes, all those things suffer. Our marriages, all those things begin to suffer. And so it really carries on an impact. So we really want to talk in this series about winning at home. And we're going to kind of narrow in on one particular group here in just a moment. We'll get there. But, I just want to just say one of the things that I do when I'm not here with you guys is I'm in a ministry that deals and helps with foster care kids and adoption for those seeking adoption. And so we do a lot of ministry with kids who come from homes where maybe dad and or mom or both were not going to be there anymore or may not be there for a long time. And so we are in that, and then we help with adoption, and we help with teen girls who find themselves pregnant and wanting to keep their baby or put it up for adoption. And so that's kind of the ministry that I'm involved in. And the reason I bring that up for 2 reasons. Number one is because Southridge Church, you guys support us in that ministry. So I want to say thank you to you guys, all right? And it's a huge, huge deal. And secondly, because I've seen the outcomes of not having a good dad in the homes. And so today we want to talk about how to be the best dad. And I realize some of you, maybe your days of being a dad are over, or maybe you're young, you just graduated from high school, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm not even a dad. I'm not even thinking about being a dad. I'm just still thinking about homeland security. And so wherever you're at in life, because you may be a dad one day, or you are a dad, or maybe those years has passed, but now you get to be a granddad, right? Which are the best, I think that God should have had you be a grandfather first and then parents, because it would have worked out better for attitudes. But anyway, statistically, if you look at this thing about dads, let me just share with you that kids growing up with a dad in their home, and let me just say this, an emotionally involved dad, not someone who's just kind of there physically, but homes that have a dad that is engaged in the family, those kids are far less likely to drop out of school, to become an alcoholic, to commit a crime, to become pregnant as a teen, to live in poverty, or have any kind of behavioral problems. And that doesn't mean that couldn't happen, but far less likely. The influence of a dad is huge. And so dads in the room, dads watching online, I just want to encourage you, be the best dad you can. And that's why we want to talk about it today, winning at home, and talk to the big dads, best dads, and the small dads too. So anyway, or the in-between, whatever. So when I grew up, and I've shared this story with you before, it's been a couple of years. I won't go into all of it, but for those of you who don't know, it'll kind of help. I grew up, my mom and dad met on a blind date, and the guy who set him up on the blind date had a bet with my biological father that he could engage sexually with this 19-year-old woman before the night was over, and he won the bet. And 9 months later, I was born. So I'm the result of a 5-year-old bet, a $5 bet, and born to a 19-year-old woman who was single at the time on a blind date. And when my dad found out about that, he left. Never seen my dad, never met my dad, don't know anything about my dad, except I was named after him, Rodney Mel. My mom got married a little while later, had my brother, then they got divorced. Then my mom got married a little while later, had my two sisters, and then they got divorced. And then my mom got married a little while later. So growing up, I've had four fathers. You know all the verses in the Bible talk about your forefathers? I know exactly what those verses mean. And but my name changed from Mel to Simpson to Dugan to Whitlock, and over the course of growing up in these homes. And so it was really kind of strange because there was all these new dads that were coming into our home. And it was awkward, like, do I call him dad? Do I call him by their first name? So a lot of times it was just, hey. I didn't know what to call them. And so I grew up in that environment. And I didn't, as I said, I had never met my father. I never even saw a picture of him. Never knew anything. So we go to the doctor and they say, any history of this on your... I don't know. I have no idea what's on that side. And so, I remember then as God providentially, and I'm skipping a lot of parts in this, but as God providentially put this together, when I'm attending school now at the University of Nebraska, on the weekends I would come back to Omaha to go to church, and I'm living in the home of the guy and his wife who set up the bet with my biological father. Because my mom, they were good friends. My mom was good friends with them. And so we had connected when we moved to Omaha. And my parents moved to England. He was in the military. And so now I'm in Omaha on the weekend staying with the very guy who set up the $5 bet. Well, my mom never told me there was this bet. She told me that it just didn't work out. And that was the end of that. So George now tells me about this $5 bet that he made with my dad. We're on the steps of his home one afternoon, and it's the first time I heard it. And he told me a little bit about my dad, and then he goes, and you look just like your father. Well, I'd never seen a picture of my dad. Nothing. And so immediately I ran into the bathroom, and I looked into the bathroom mirror, and for the first time in my life, I saw a picture of my father. And it was at that point that I realized just how good-looking he really was. Not sure why you're laughing. But anyway, here's my point. My point is I didn't grow up in a good home. I didn't grow up with the model father. I had four very different situations. And you may have come from a home that was far worse than that. I'm not here to compare war stories with you. That's not the point. The point is that I'm here to say, regardless of the home that you came from, doesn't mean that you have to carry on that and you can be the best dad. You can turn that around. You can say, you know what, I maybe didn't have the right model, but I'm going to be and live out the right model. And so let's talk about this thing with being the best dad, about what this involves. So Ephesians 5:1, and you can follow along on the app or take notes or whatever. But Ephesians 5:1, because you've been in this series and it's involved Ephesians 5 and part of Ephesians 6. I love the first verse. It says, imitate God. So dads, and we all should do this, but let me just talk to the dads from dad to dad for a couple moments. Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do. Why? Because we're His children. We have a Heavenly Father who's a perfect Father in every way, and we can look to Him and say, okay, Dad, Father, you are perfect in every way. And He says now, okay, imitate God, imitate me in everything you do. So if I can learn to walk as God, in other words, as God treats me as His child, and I could say, okay, what would I want from my father as a perfect dad? Now maybe I can incorporate that in my life as a dad to my own kids. And I can learn to be the best dad that I could ever be for my children. Remember that you have a Father who really wants... You ever ask God this question? Have you ever asked, God, what do you really want? I mean, think about this. What do you really want? You know what I think that what God really wants is a family. I think He really wants a family. He wants to be a part of... Why does He refer to Himself as Father? He wants to be a part of a family. And so as a result of that, He says, I'm going to give you, watch this, I'm going to give you children so that you'll better understand who I am. Because as a father, I look at my kids who weren't growing up, who weren't always, as connected to me as I wanted them to be, or maybe they weren't always, they didn't respond the way that I wanted them to respond, or whatever, and there was issues. Every family has those issues, right? And now I can look at God and say, okay, God, I have a clearer picture of who you are, because you're a perfect dad. I'm not, but you are, and yet you still have children who rebel against you, who curse your name, who reject you. So when my kid maybe doesn't respond the way I want them to, it gives me a better picture of what God goes through as someone who wants a family, and yet not all of his children want to be a part of that family. And yet he still loves them. He still loves them. So that challenges me as a dad to love my kids, even though maybe they don't always react the way I want them to or respond the way I want them to. So Ephesians 5:15 through 20. Let's look at this. It says this. So this is further on in the chapter now. Remember, imitate God, verse 1, verse 15. So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Watch this. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Don't be drunk with wine, because that will ruin your life. Instead, watch this, be filled with the Holy Spirit, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs amongst yourselves, and making music to the Lord in your hearts, and give thanks in everything to God the Father. See, and so here's what Paul, the writer, is saying to this church in Ephesus. He's saying, okay, guys, I want you to do this. I want you to grow in your spiritual life. I want you to be filled with the Spirit. I want you to sing and worship. I want you to give generously. I want you to be thankful. And so he's laying out, watch this, he's laying out this idea of how do I grow spiritually? That's what he's saying right here. And then, watch this, right after this passage, he starts talking about husbands and wives. It's interesting that he's saying this. What he's really saying is this. Here's how you grow spiritually, right? Sing, worship, be filled with the Spirit. How do you live it out? You live it out in the home. Because following right underneath all this spiritual stuff he talks about is the practicality of how you live it out. Husbands, love your wives. Wives, love your husbands. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, mothers, all these things. He even talks about employers and employees if you keep reading. The idea being this. The more spiritual you become, the more practical and caring you become. So if you want to know where someone is at spiritually, look how they treat other people. How do they treat their spouse? How do they treat their kids? How do they treat their parents? How do they treat their employers? How do they treat their employees? How do they treat people, their neighbors? How do they do that? Because the more that I'm filled with the Spirit, the more that I live according to the Spirit, the more that I learn to worship, the more that I learn to do all these things, it's lived out in my daily life. And so as a dad, it's really kind of one of those accountability things in my life that I go, okay, how am I growing spiritually? Well, I'm doing great. But am I living it out in my home? See? And so he goes through this whole process. So we're going to talk about best dads. But before we get there, we have to do some dad jokes. Because that would be fun, right? Those of you at home, agree? Okay, good. So here's a couple of dad jokes. So what do you call a monkey who shares an Amazon account? Primates. So, right? Some of these may take a while for you. Hang in there, okay? Why do stand-up comedians perform poorly in Hawaii? Because the audience only responds in a low ha. These are not good dad jokes, okay? By the way, have you seen my Gone in 60 Seconds DVD? It was here a minute ago. I got a snort. That's a good thing then, right? Did you know that bees are actually allergic to pollen? Yeah, they break out in hives. Now, I'm noticing that this group likes these more than this group over here. I don't know what the deal is. All right, for those of you who are concerned, it's the last one, all right? Why did the man fall down the well? Because he couldn't see that well. That was funny because it was laugh, 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 laugh. I could see got it. Okay, so what is the best dad? What is the best dad? What does the best dad look like? What is the best dad? How do you live this out? How do you grow in being a dad? Verse 4 of chapter 6 in the Amplified Version says this. Fathers. So this is pretty clear who he's talking to here. And this is not to minimize any role of a mom. This is not about that. We're just talking to the dads. Last week, I think we talked about the moms. This week is dad's turn. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. I mean, so he really, in just a few words, goes to the dads and says, okay, dads, here's the deal. Don't provoke your children to anger. But there's an understanding when Paul's writing this that carries with it a whole lot more than just that one sentence. And we'll break that down a little bit here. But he says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. In other words, do not exacerbate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial or unreasonable or humiliating or abusive. So he's saying, okay, dads, first of all, let's talk about what not to do. Don't provoke them. Don't give them reason to be angry or resentful towards you or towards the family. Nor by showing favoritism or indifference to any of them. And I love this next part. But bring them up. In other words, lift them up. Let them stand, so to speak, on your shoulders in life. To have a better view of life than you had from your perspective. Bring them up. Okay, tenderly and with loving kindness in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So what he's really saying is, okay, don't do this, but rather do this, and kind of here's how you do this. And so Paul, in just that one verse, gives dads just a great little idea of what this means to be the best dad ever. So dads, there's a similar verse found in Colossians 3:21. It says this, fathers, do not aggravate your children, or they will become discouraged. So what Paul does, and he's writing to a different church in this one, but what Paul does here is he said, okay, basically the same thing. Don't aggravate, don't provoke. Why? Because your kids will become discouraged. And the more discouraged they become, the more they give up on themselves. And the more they give up on themselves, the more they find themselves doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And the more that and the cycle just goes. See? So the idea is, don't do your best to not give them a reason to become discouraged in life. But bring them up. Let them see things that maybe you didn't see. Let them encounter things in a way that gives them perspective. So 2 thoughts are given directly to dads on this. Number 1, if you're ready, you say, I'm ready. Are you at home ready? Good. All right, number 1, don't create unnecessary trouble. Don't create unnecessary trouble. There's enough trouble in our world today without us creating more of it. So don't create this. In other words, don't provoke them. Avoid the things or actions in life as a dad that might create serious or lifelong problems in the life of a child. Now that's easier to say than do. And what does that look like? And how do I begin in that? All right, good question. You guys are asking good questions. Don't bring them feelings of anger or frustration. So let's break it down. The anger, the frustrations. So I'm frustrated with dad right now. How did they get there? What did I do? Don't begin to do these things in your life or continue to do these things out of anger. Now, let me just stop for a moment and say this. Maybe in being a dad, your dad, and maybe up to this point, maybe you're listening to this and you're going, man, I've already blown it. I might as well just give up. Or, man, there's no hope. Or, man, if you just knew how I kind of treated things, or I got a kid who's kind of wayward right now because of something I said or whatever. Listen. It's never too late to turn this around. Never. Right? You keep fighting for that relationship. And I'm going to talk about this here in some more in just a moment. So don't create these feelings of resentment toward them. Don't bring shame upon them. Don't bring unrealistic expectations upon them. So these are things not to do. In a moment we'll get to the things to do. And don't be harsh. And dads, let me just say this. I'm talking not the preacher, not the guest guy, dad to dad. As dads, we need to understand our capacity to be harsh with people. Dads, men in general, can be harsh at times. And sometimes we take it out on our kids or our spouse. And we need to understand the capacity we have to be harsh with people. Because once I understand that a little bit better, then when I start to see it start to edge that way, I go, you know what? If I keep going down this path, I know I can be real harsh. So I'm going to back off and come back and do my best to be kind and loving and caring. Because if I keep going. So now understand this. Paul is writing in a world that is largely dominated by the Roman culture, the Roman people. So this is a very Roman period of time that Paul is writing to this church. You got to understand about Roman culture from the dad's perspective. Dads in the Roman culture, in the Roman nation, were able to do anything that they wanted with their kids. They could sell them. They could have them killed. They could treat them as long as the dad was alive. So even if the kid was now an adult, the dad was still the dad, and he could do anything he wanted with his kids. And that's the culture that Paul is writing to in this setting. He's saying, guys, don't do what the Roman guys are doing. So how does that translate to us? Dads, you see what's taking place in our world and how, and I see it working in a foster care community. You see how dads are treating their kids? That's the Roman way. Let's do the Christian way. Let's be caring and kind and loving and treat our kids totally different from what the world is treating their kids. Let's be different in this way. And so Paul's advising dads to not use their authority in a way that would cause their children to harbor resentment or all of the things that we've talked about. Be totally different. He says, be kind, be gracious, be forgiving. Number 2, create an environment that encourages growth. Encourages growth. In other words, bring them up. Everybody say, bring them up. Yeah, good. Bring them up. Watch this. Bring them up, emphasizing, patience, tenderness, practicing kindness. Now, guys, most of my youth guys are sitting over here. Is that right? Most of the students are sitting over here. Students, let me just tell you something, how easy you got it today. Because you guys, like when, and I think the adults would agree, when we were growing up, we had no such thing as called timeout. You know what I mean? We got beat, basically, okay? You got beat? Okay. Are you looking at your mom right now? So I'm going to walk over here now, okay? Yeah, I mean, we didn't get spankings. We got whoopings. You know what I mean? Like, and my mom, I don't know what it was. Like, when we got in trouble, did you just move over by your mom? Okay. See, it's too late. Okay. You're going to have to do dishes for a month. Anyway, so, it was drop your drawers, grab your ankles, bend over, and then my mom she would use my belt. You know what I mean? That's like giving the Taliban your gun. You know what I mean? Like, here, take this and shoot me. So she would, and then she was left-handed. And I don't know what it is with left-handed people. I think they're just angry at life. But she would, bend, and she would rear back. I mean, like this. Hi, guys. She would rear back and just, boom. And I saw Jesus just then. I did. He was waving me in. He was saying, come on, you're almost there. Just keep coming. I mean, it was like, and then, and her eyes would roll back like sharks, you know what I mean? Like they're like eating and just, and then after a while, she would say something like this: do you think you've had enough? And regardless of how you answered that question, it was a dumb answer, because if you said no, that was just stupid, right? No, I haven't had enough. Keep going. And if you said yes, then she would respond, oh, you think you've had enough, huh? Well, then you won't need more. And so you guys have it so easy today. It's like, go to your room and no TV for an hour. Anyway, so let me just say that was not patient and tender and kind and loving as Paul is challenging us. He's saying use heavy doses of patience. Heavy doses. Listen, I'm a dad. I get it. There are moments that I just like, but use heavy doses of patience with your kids. Let them see that you are doing your best to model your Father in heaven. You're doing your best to imitate your Father in heaven. You're doing your best to live out. So when you caution them on an issue, and when you counsel them on an issue, and when you correct them on an issue, do it in such a way that doesn't provoke anger in their hearts. Do it in a way that doesn't discourage them from being the man or the woman of God that they can be. And so he says, the earthly father, Paul describes, loves unconditionally. It's a picture of the prodigal son. You remember that story from Luke 15 where the son takes the money, he squanders it all, he lives in all kinds of a bad lifestyle. He goes away and finally says, you know what, I'm going to come back home because it was better there than it is here, and I'll just be a servant there. I don't even need to be a son anymore because I don't deserve to be a son. And as he's coming back, the father sees him and runs to his son It's really more a story about the Father than it is about the Son. He runs to His Son. He embraces Him. He says, listen, I know you've done a lot of crazy things, but I just want you to know that I love you unconditionally. I welcome you back in this family unconditionally. So you bring them up by using the appropriate discipline. And I'll give you a little bit more on this here in just a sec. You correct them for the direction you want them to go, not basically on what they've done in the past. But where do I want my kids to go? That's how I'm going to correct them. Bring them up with the instruction of the Lord, which means as a dad, I need to know what God's Word says about living life. Because if I know what the Bible says about living life, then I can use the instruction from the Lord to help my children, to help my kids live out their lives. Let me give you just a little bit of a little idea here. We don't have time to go into all of it. But when your kids are younger, you need to tell them more things. Don't do this, don't do this, do this. But here's the mistake sometimes that we as parents can make, is that we continue to try to tell them when they're 16, 17, and 18 years of age, and then they're not prepared for life as an adult, right? So here's kind of the transition you make. You're still a parent, but what you do is you move from telling to asking. So, Mom, Dad, I want to go to this party. Okay, let me ask you a question. Who's going to be there? Okay, good. If you go to this party, what could possibly happen? Well, I suppose there could be this that happens. Okay, if that happens, how does that affect you and where you're going in life? Or what could... In other words, you're asking them questions to help them think through and process rather than telling them, no, you can't go, or okay, go, whatever, or whatever. So you're asking questions in life to help them. In other words, you're kind of coaching them a little bit through how to process things in front of them that they haven't really thought about. And as a dad, you can do that with your kids, and they don't feel threatened like, my dad, he doesn't let me do anything. Or my dad, he doesn't care what I do. See, I'm involved in his life or her life, and I'm doing everything I can to help them to be a better adult. Remember, you're, as a parent, as a dad, you're not raising better 13 and 14-year-olds. You're raising better 30 and 40-year-olds. You want them to succeed at life, not just when they're at home under your roof. You want them to be the best. You want them to be better than you. I want my kids to be better than me. See? So you bring them up with the instruction of the Lord. There's an intentional training. And then you bring them up with words and actions. Actions. It's telling and showing. It's speaking and modeling what you want them to look like. And so in other words, it's not, listen, here's the reason. Kids don't just want to hear a sermon, they want to see a sermon. In other words, they want to know what we're listening to in church, are we living it out at home? And if not, why not? And if so, why? So that these aren't two different worlds. This world is that world and that world is this world. We're a family regardless of whether we're in home or in this church. We're a family. We have a Father. And we do our best to live out God's Word, His instruction, in every place we go. At work, in school, at home, in church, wherever we're at, we're living out His Word. See? Training. Let's break this word down just for a moment. Training. The whole Proverbs 22 where it says, raise up a child in the way they should go, or train up a child in the way they should. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do I train up a child? How do I train to bring them up? The idea is that the training aspect is God's way of life, or God's purpose of life, or God's direction of life to a child's learning style. So in other words, what that basically means is as a dad, I can't treat or train up every one of my kids the same way because they're all different. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. My 2 boys are night and day. My 2 girls are night and day. My 2 girls, my oldest one, you could beat until she was purple, and she would turn around and go, is that all you got? My other daughter, you go, Bethany, and she's like, tears are coming down her face. You know what I mean? 2 totally different approaches. So if I tried to do one on one and one on the other, it just wouldn't work. If I tried to do it all the same. So what you do is you say, okay, God, this is your direction for their life. I'm training up my child. This is your direction for their life. This is their personalities, their character, how they live, how they process. So as a dad, I need to know that about my kids. That means I'm involved in their life so that when it comes to training, I take this piece and I put it appropriately in this piece. And then I begin to help them process and work towards what God has for their life. See? So I'm training up my child in the way that they should go. And I'm then at the same time, I'm being careful of understanding this, that children are really a reflection of you. Did you know that? Have you ever done this? Michael, stop acting that way. Whoops, that's what I do. You know what I mean? As a dad, you see yourself in your kid, and suddenly you don't like something you see in them, and you go, wait a minute, I do that. Maybe what if God was using your kids to help you be better? Ooh. I think He does. I think one of the reasons God gave kids to parents was to help them be better parents, to understand God more as a parent, and then to grow as an individual because you had a real life situation in front of you where you could live out the spirituality of your life. See, you could live it out daily in your home, minute by minute in your home, and understand that. And so we see our kids in us. Now, the good news. Here's the good news. Everybody ready for some good news? 3 of you. The good news. Parents, you're not raising your child alone. Jesus is in every home. And watch this. Jesus cares more about your kids than you do. He cares more about your kids than you do. He wants what's best for your kids. He has His calling on their life. And dads, let me encourage you to, and I know it's easy to say, pray for your kids, but here, let me give you specific. Pray for your kids and ask, remember, be filled with the Spirit. In other words, go after the wisdom and instruction and all those things of the Lord. How do I do that? Filled with Spirit, learn to worship, learn to give, learn to thank, all those things that He talked about there in chapter 5. But let me just say this. Dads, ask the Lord, say, Lord, what plan, God's plan, purpose, direction, do you have for each one of my kids? Show me so that I can help train them up in that. When I was a dad, when my kids were smaller, that was a prayer I prayed often for each of my 4 kids. God, what do you have for each of my kids? Because then I can pray into that and help them. And then that helps me when it comes time to correct them because I have an idea of where they're going that they don't yet know. So I can begin to help them in that process. So how can I be the best dads ever? Let me give you 5 real quick things. This is going to be quick, so let's get right. So 5 best practices for being a best dad. Number 1, affectionately love your family. Affectionately love you. Let me just say this: the number one thing that parents can do, to help their kids is to be affectionate in front of your kids. I know they go, ooh, that's gross. Stop kissing. Ooh, get a room. All those things, right? But you know what? They love it. They really do. Because it breeds security in them and saying, okay, my parents are okay. They love each other. It's going to be okay. So they love it even though they get, and the more comments they give about that they not like it, keep doing it. They love it that much more, okay? So be affectionate in front of your kids, your family, your home, all of those things. 1 Peter 4:8 says, most important of all, continue to show deep love for each other. Continue to show deep love, for love covers a multitude of sins. So if there's stuff that's happened in your home that's not good, guess what? Love covers a multitude of all that stuff. So love, okay? See, I'm a 60s kid, so that's where that came from. Number 2, dedicate your children to the Lord. Dedicate. There's the tangible, physical dedicating your child that we do in churches, right? But this is more than that. This is more than a one-time thing. It's a daily, weekly kind of thing. Lord, I give you my kids. I want you to have them. I want you're really their father. So as kind of managing, if you will, my kids for a moment here in life, I'm dedicating them to you. And Psalm 127:3, and I'm going to add verse 4 into this. Children are a gift from the Lord; they are a reward from Him. Think about that, dads. Your kids are a reward to you. And then verse 4: children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hand. In other words, as a dad, my kids can either be a weapon for the family or against the family. It depends on how I, as a dad, use those arrows and treat those arrows and embrace those arrows that God has given me. So dedicate your children to the Lord. Number 3, speak life into your kids. Speak life into your kids. There's enough negative talk out there. They don't need anything in the home that's negative because they're getting it in school and the workplaces and on the streets. They're getting it out there. Speak life into your kids. Proverbs 18:4 says, the words of a discreet and wise man's mouth are like deep waters, plenteous and difficult to fathom. In other words, we can't comprehend the depth and influence that these words have in a person. And a fountain of skillful and godly wisdom is like a gushing stream, sparkling fresh. Listen, the whole thing of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words never. Well, listen, words hurt. They do. I threw a dictionary at my kid the other day, and it hurt. I'm telling you, words hurt. I didn't really. But words hurt. So give them life. Let me give you a couple. I'm proud of you. Man, I'm so proud of you. What do you think? Wow, he values my opinion. Instead of just giving the answer, go, what do you think? I love your laugh. In other words, I love how you laugh. I love when you're happy. You're expressing. Because here's the deal. What you reward gets repeated. Thanks for helping me. It means a lot that you would take time to help me on this. I see how you're trying harder. In other words, maybe you didn't reach the goal. Maybe you didn't get to where you wanted to. But I see how you're trying harder. And we're going to get there together. You're so creative. I believe in you. I really do. You can do it. I love you. Do you know the age that most girls find themselves in relationships that they shouldn't have gotten into is the ages of 13, 14. Why is that? Because it's at that point that most dads will back off of embracing or touching their child in an appropriate way, because as the young girl begins to mature in her in her body and in her character and all those things, the dad becomes a little bit awkward about that. And at that point, it's when the girl says, Dad doesn't love me or doesn't care, doesn't hug me as much, and so she goes out and finds it somewhere else. This is statistically, this is what is happening. And dads, let me encourage you, that's the moment that you need to learn. Listen, even if it's just, one of the things I did when my kid would be walking through the hallway or through a living room area and we would just be passing, heading in different directions, is sometimes I would just stop and grab them on the shoulders and I'd say, hey, I just want you to know I love you. Get out of here. Or, I would tap them on the shoulder, hit them on the back. Just some way to contact them or let them know, I know you're here. I love you. I'm for you. I'm just expressing in just a 1 or 2 second way, you're it for me. See, one of the things when my boys graduated from high school is I wrote to 12 other men who knew my boys, and I said, would you write a letter to my boys just to encourage them, challenge them, anything you want to say to them in life. And I put those in a little booklet, and at graduation, I handed those 12 letters. And I remember Michael, my oldest, he looked at me when I handed it to them, and he goes, and tears started coming down, and he goes, Dad, you mean that there's 12 men who believe in me? I go, yeah. There's something about speaking life and dedicating and having affection for your kids that transforms their life. And it's never too late. Number 4, build a legacy for your kids. Help your kids build a legacy worth repeating. That really matters. I love what 1 Chronicles 29, this is David talking about and praying actually to God for his son Solomon in 29:19. It says, give my son Solomon the wholehearted desire to obey all my commands, laws, and decrees, and to do everything necessary to build this temple. In other words, David was saying, I'm never going to build a temple like this. This temple is going to be magnificent, but my son is going to do it. God, help him in that endeavor, because I want his legacy to be bigger than my legacy. and you build a foundation for your kids so that they rise bigger than you. And number 5, ask forgiveness to bring the joy. Romans 4:7. Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sins are put out of sight. So, let me close with this. At one time, and I may have told this story, I don't remember, I'm old, 60, remember, and I don't remember what I said where. At one time, I worked at the national, our denominational headquarters. I was the national student discipleship director. So I was responsible for helping youth groups all over the country with their discipleship stuff. But one of the things that I did was this thing called a National Fine Arts Festival. And so we'd have anywhere from 12 to 15,000 parents, youth leaders, and students gather every year in a city, and they would do arts stuff, music, dance, poem, photography, all kinds of stuff. I mean, and there was thousands of kids all over the nation that would come in, and I was responsible for that. And I had a staff of several. I had about a couple hundred volunteers, and we rented out a big convention center in a city, and that was my job. And so we were down in Orlando, and I had my kids with me, and it's the end of the week, and I'm exhausted. You know, late nights, lots of activity during the day. It's crazy, and I'm just exhausted. And I'm not using it as an excuse. I'm just telling you where I was at. And then you get to Orlando to fly out, and I don't know if you've ever flown out of Orlando. It's like a zoo because every kid in America is there, and the lines are long, and they say, get there 2 hours ahead of time, which we did, and I get there, and they can't find our tickets. And I fly enough to know that if you miss a flight and you have a family there was 5 of us at the time, our oldest was out of the home, that you're going to get separated, and I didn't want that to happen. And so I'm like, and 45 minutes later, they finally find our tickets. Well, by that time now, we've only got an hour to get through security, and the lines are long. And I'm looking, and because this is in the summer, everybody's in Orlando, and I'm looking, and all of a sudden I see this line over there, and it says, line for parents with children. So I said, guys, come on, let's go. And there's nobody in line over there. So I walk over there, and I should say it's a lot shorter. There was people up there, but nobody in the hallways like the other lines. I go up there, and I said, hey, we're here to check in. She goes, oh, no, this is only for parents with small kids. So I said, guys, step down. And I said, but the sign says kids. She said, I know, but it's really small kids. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I was really tired, and I was a little frustrated, and I was afraid we were going to miss our flight. So, you know all the piece I talked about being tender and loving and patient? Let's just say it wasn't real spiritual. And so I just had this little conversation with the lady, and I tried to explain, and we're going to miss our flight, and da-da-da-da. Sorry. So we get back in line, and our line is not moving. And I'm looking at my watch, and I'm going, there is no way we're going to make this. And after a couple of minutes, I look over, and she's waving me. So we went through, got on the flight, flew into Kansas City. So now 3.5 hour drive home. And I mean, again, it's the end of the day now. We're all exhausted. It's been one of those. And so we get into the van, and the kids start arguing about anything and everything, right? And Michael and Bethany's older, but my money was on Michael. And so they're having this little thing, right? And they're just fighting and stuff. And we're like, stop, and all this kind of stuff. We get home. And I said, okay, guys, everybody in the house except Michael, if you could help me bring the luggage in, we'll get the luggage in. Everybody else just go in. We all need to kind of just relax. And so Michael and I get the luggage out of the car. And we come to the front door. And I say, hey, are you okay? And he starts crying on the steps of our home. And he goes, hey, Dad, you remember how you treated that lady at the airport? I had forgotten about that. And this was hours ago. I go, yeah. He goes, Dad, that wasn't real nice. He did it really respectfully. And I said, you know what, you're right. And I started tearing up, and we hugged and we cried right there. And I said, please forgive me. to my teenage son for the way that I treated that lady. It wasn't right. I got to be honest with you. That was one of the most spiritual moments I've ever had in my life, right there. And it had nothing to do at that point, and hear my heart on this, it had nothing to do with me opening a Bible or in a service or anything. It was a moment of a dad and a son living out the truths of Scripture. Where a dad has to come to a place and say, you know what, I blew it. You're right. Forgive me. And we have a great relationship. Why is that? It's because the moment on the stairs makes a difference in people's lives. So I want to close by just praying, and you guys have been great. I know I went a little longer, but let me just pray for two different things. First of all, I want to pray for the dads. And I want to pray that God would help you to be the best dad. To be the best dad. To be the best husband. To be the best employee. To be the best employer. To be the best that you can be. And then second, there may be some of you here, and during the service, look up here, that maybe you just felt like, man, God was really speaking to me, and I don't really know Him as my Father. I don't really know who God is as a Father to me. I've never really taken opportunity to get to know Him as my Father. And I just want to encourage you, in just a moment we're going to pray a prayer, and all of us are going to pray, that in this prayer that we would ask the Father that we could be one of His children. And that only happens through the death of His Son, Jesus Christ. That we say, Jesus, thank you for dying on the cross for me and forgiving me of my sin. And I surrender my life to you so that I can know my Father. Because you look just like your Father, created in His image. And He wants a family. So the first group, dads, let's all do this together. Could you just, right where you're at, silently just pray for the dads in the room? Heavenly Father, I pray for all the dads that are watching online right now, that are here in this auditorium. I thank you for all the dads right now. And I pray, God, that you would help them to be the best dad ever. That you would equip them and empower them and strengthen them and encourage them and be merciful to them and be forgiving to them and help them to follow through with the instruction and training and favor of the Lord with their kids. Regardless of their kids' ages, regardless of the status of where they're at. Let today be a great turning point in the life of all the dads. And I thank you for that. And as you have your heads bowed and your eyes closed all across this room, those of you watching online, I just want everybody in this room and even those watching to just repeat a prayer after me. And for those of you who've never surrendered your life to Jesus, this will be a moment where as you repeat these words, you can say, you know what, Lord, these are more than just that guy's words up there. These are my words. I mean it with all my heart. I want you to come and forgive me of my sin, and I want to live for you. So everybody repeat this after me. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, to me. Thank you, for Jesus, for giving your life, dying on a cross, forgiving me of my sin, so that I can have life in you. I ask you to forgive me of every sin. Help me to live for you. I surrender to you. I want God as my Father. I want to spend eternity with you as part of your family. And Jesus, I thank you for that. Thank you for hearing my prayer. In Jesus, your wonderful name. Amen.